discussing history notes and the public service for that and how we score guilds on it and some details when reviewing those public APIs. Nick, what do you want to add to the discussion?
Yeah, I think we might also want to touch a bit on what happened with Wombat and see if there are any good ideas for how to handle stuff like that in the future and set some action points for that.
Okay, maybe we can start with that one then, because that was a recent issue right there. So to summarize, Saturday night, 11 p.m. or 11:30 p.m., Wombat started producing Wombat's node started producing blocks on its own because it was only peered to local state history nodes, which apparently died because of low disk space and weren't syncing anymore. So no blocks were forwarded, no proper blocks were forwarded to the BP nodes. And they were not able to unregister themselves because the nodes didn't understand that they were forking off, right? And we needed to solve that by revoting the top 20 guilds and excluding Wombat for the moment, which happened after some hours have passed by and a few hundred blocks were missed. And then on the governance channel, a few ideas have been discussed on how that issue should be treated in going forward, right? To throw the term into the room, social unregister. That's how we talked about it inside the OIG. Main idea being that the majority of top 21 guilds, and I don't know, I don't have a clear picture if that's a good idea or not, should be able to vote out a guild that is not responsive for a prolonged time and not recovering their BP node within a certain time, like let's say within 4 hours of missing blocks or whatever it is. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, another issue I think that might need to follow up is the fact that there was no way to reach somebody that could do the unreg. I mean, unregistering is something that you can just do. It doesn't depend on the block producers. It's just an action that you must sign. So that's something that should always be able to be done by themselves. But there was also like everybody tried to get in contact with them and nothing worked. So as far as I know, there needs to be like emergency contacts available for every BP. And apparently that failed as well. So I would look into, do you still have current information on every BP so that you can reach them in a short time?
Okay. So since we are a decentralized landscape, we have that one place where we have like the emergency contact to the guild's representatives. But other than that, we have some public channels where we communicate. There's always the possibility to ping someone in DMs, right? Which happened shortly after the incident started. I think many pings have been sent out. And still, at that time, no one responsible for the node was available, which can still happen, even if you call them by phone. So we were thinking, I think, more about a solution that doesn't require that guild to be so responsive at that time. Or we don't want to depend on the availability of the sysadmin at that time. Those incidents can happen in the middle of the night, and even then it's probably difficult to reach someone via phone call, I imagine. So we're thinking more of solutions that are free of dependencies.
No, one doesn't include the other, but I was like, maybe it's a good opportunity to contact every guild and make sure that you have a good way to actually reach somebody always, no?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, given that, it would be also not so easy, I imagine, to reach out to, let's say, 15 of the top 21 guilds and prepare an MSIG for them to correct the voting, which would exclude that one problematic guild at that time.
I have some opinions, but I'm letting everybody else chime in first. Maybe not.
Everyone is curious to hear your opinion, so go ahead.
Well, I'll say this, and I've said it a couple times. Aloha, their monitoring tool, I'm pretty sure still has the ability that when it detects, it can auto-propose like a randomly generated name, but an MSIG of, I don't know, top 21, top 30, whatever it is, to unregister. I think it does an unregister or nulls the keys, whatever it does, but it basically forces them to kind of unregister as opposed to like revoting. So technically, it's there. They'd probably have to uncomment the code, but it's doable. From a technical aspect, it's a 6-second pause of the chain, better than double producing, which causes rollbacks and stuff. But it's not detrimental. Chain doesn't really stop. It queues what it can. Some things will expire. But overall, for the health, I hate to see a BP when there's 15 others that are like, I mean, shit happens, cosmic rays happen, have to suffer for hours. I've been there before where you're in a sleep, bad situation, whatever. And literally the only reason it's happened to go on that long is, I mean, it could be solved, but you're waiting to see how long it takes them because that's part of the competition almost, So I hate to see that. So I always would vote to try to help somebody out, unregister them, help a brother out, and whatever. But the way that impacts scoring and the way that impacts even just the overall competition of DPOS and what we do and the roles we provide is a different conversation. It's difficult, but there are scripts now to help you, and there are other mechanisms you can do to make it better. But it ain't just run itself, And what they had set up and kind of burned them, it's a EOS USA coma. When you kind of end up on an island, that's the right configuration. You have to have these nodes to protect you from kind of the nasties of the rest of the network. But if they all go offline and you don't notice it or can't respond, they signed a bunch of blocks. They just weren't the right blocks. Anyway, a couple of different points on that.
What are the implications on? Nick, maybe you want to follow up on that. Go ahead.
It was also like the action that was taken now. I think when there was 300 something blocks missed, I said like, why don't you just vote them out to resolve it? It's also like the mention then was, okay, it's a bit extreme. We don't know if we want to do that. But in the end, that was still the action that was taken. So I would also like talk among yourselves, like what is appropriate, at what point would you take something like that? Another approach would be like, okay, we have a threshold for X amount of outage. You could have an oracle that pushes like the stats on chain and then have the action in a contract that can do the unreg or change the vote or whatever based on those stats that are pushed. So that's also something that you can take no, Michael?
And I'm sure Anders, because he's always the pessimist, but complete automation of things really, I mean, you do have to worry. You can rapidly attack things and spiral things out of control when it's all completely automated and on chain monitored stuff like that. But to give
the safety threshold, right? That it would like be a precondition, and then you could still say like, okay, and now basically the OIG can do the voting or something like that, so that you don't have to have the 15 consensus, but you have some sorts of layers of protection. Like You can still act swiftly, but you don't have to get everyone involved. So something like that was more the idea.
And we've done some light permissions on other chains too, like a 7 of 15 or 7 of 21 or whatever. You do got to get, when you unregister BPs, you can start shifting and, you trigger some domino effects pretty quickly and all of a sudden things can change. So there's a, doomsday type of conversation about it, but in relation to, and you saw it, there's normally and should be about 15 of us that are generally available and paying attention, at least enough to be like, yo, you're right. They had a couple of hours. Either they say they can't get to it or they don't respond or whatever. Do you just let it continue just to prove a point? Or, in my opinion, there's 15 of us that could get to keys and say, yeah. Some of us will do it sooner, be like, I'll try to help a brother out as soon as I can. Some people will be like, damn, it's been 12 hours. I guess it's going to be one of those weekends. In my opinion, I automate it. That's why I say the Aloha tool or any other tool that monitors and says, hey, I think that something's out of whack. Do you guys want to do this? And if it's 2 or 3, fine, then we can approve 2 or 3. We can just understand what we're doing. But complete automation and anything that's not manual MSIGs, either at the OIG level, I struggle to say anything less than a 15 out of 21. Because that also includes a 7 out of 15 or 7 out of 21 that can block it. You know what I mean? My 2 whacks. Does that answer your question? Or respond to your point?
So, just for understanding, there are 2 options we are currently exploring, right? The one is like voting and excluding them from the voting like we did last time. And the other one is forcing a BP unreg collectively, like socially.
BP unreg doesn't work on WAX.
Because we would need to implement it in the system contracts?
Because the WAX team need to give up their power.
Okay. Got it.
But we can use the voting. There is enough voting power delegated to the IG account. That's what we are using for voting. But I personally will not. I don't like being as the one that are creating doing the new voting. So I think ideally it should be the block producers, as long, let's say 2 hours pass and nothing happened, then it issues a script checking this, issues a multisig, and then block producers vote, and they can vote a new voting list without the block producer that is missing rounds.
I do think Anders wins the gold star for now because he's right. We don't have any EOSIO.
No, you misunderstood what I said. The OIG account has a lot of voting power. That's where we upload the scores, right?
Yes.
And that shifts the top 21. Doesn't unregister the block producer, but it
Right.
kicks it out of top 21 at least.
You have the ability to control enough votes. Correct. You can shift it.
So we could delegate that to EOSIO prods.
No.
Why not? There's a special function, something that can be used, and then the block producers can collectively decide.
If you change something, yes. But right now, the block producers don't have any permissions on EOSIO.
No, you don't need it on EOSIO. You can get it on the OIG proxy account, and then you use that action.
That's what I'm saying.
If you use votes to do it, I agree. I'm just the technical ability doesn't exist for us to unregister.
No, you didn't.
We have to be able to manipulate the votes. Which you're right.
Joseph, he's saying the same thing as you in a different way.
I'm understanding what you're saying. No.
Yes.
Well, on other chains, we wrap an action that doesn't unregister or null the keys or whatever as EOSIO BP prods. We don't have that ability, just like you said, Anders. I mean, I agree with you. But what Joseph's saying is the OIG or potentially BPs could have influence over this.
We already have that.
Votes. Well, the OIGs do, the BPs don't.
Yeah, but if in the OIG, which is a contract, we set up a function and delegate it to EOSIO prods to do that, we don't need to require to mess with system contracts, right?
I agree that the potential solution.
And then EOSIO prods can change the list of the current top 21 in some specific cases with extra signatures of OIG, for example. So you don't only can do it without EOSIO prods, also the OIG, and it's a collectively decision, right? But it's just, we only have to change a function in the OIG account.
Using the votes to change that is different than unregistering that.
Exactly, that's what I said. I'm not talking about unregistering, just removing.
Fine, done. Good. I don't disagree with you, Joseph. It's talking is different.
That's odd.
Okay, so we are on the same page that the social unreg would be possible if we added the multisig of EOSIO prods, right, to the guild's OIG contract, which then would be able to re-vote, excluding that one guild. They wouldn't be unregistered, but they wouldn't be in producing order.
Possible, yes. I don't know if there are any risks associated with it.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Because
do they get demoted to number 22? Or do they get unregistered?
They do not get unregistered. They just don't get voted in the top.
Yeah. So they can't produce anymore on mainnet until we vote them in, which will typically happen at latest every 14 days, right?
Do we get to zero out their score and bump them to the bottom of the list? As long as they don't get a number 21 or 22. That's what
in
happens
this case,
with those votes.
We all agree that we cannot force them to unregister. That's something that we cannot do that with the current permissions that the chain has.
And that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, that's a different problem.
But we have the guidelines, and within the guidelines, if you miss like 98% of availability, which was the case in this issue, you fail the minimum requirements, and then you're out for at least 2 weeks, right? So this is what's going to happen naturally.
But let me ask you this. If you force them to lose the OIG vote, but they have the most of the popular vote because they're just one of the long-term OIG or OGs, wouldn't they slide to number 22?
It's possible, but we still have, this is a problem that we already have with Cafe and other block producers that quit WAX and never, but that's a different problem. This is something that we're working to solve one day. But we already had this problem before this incident, right?
Right, and if a 15 of 21 could have solved that.
And yeah, I do agree that's something we have to solve someday. But we're trying to find a solution for another situation like this one that just happened. That, to be honest, it's quite odd and rare because it never happened before in WAX. So I'm quite happy for that because we have very reliable block producers on WAX compared with other chains. I'm super proud of it. It's just one incident in like 5 years like this. So
no, I mean, that's because we all live on pins and needles for cosmic rays, or at least some of them. My point is twofold. Number one, yes, the BPs having zero ability to do anything about this on the chain that we are BPs on in itself is a problem. Relatively easily fixed by giving the BPs the control of EOSIO, at least at the active level. Keep God mode. Coexist as a weight of one. Doesn't matter, but we can't even do anything as BPs with half of the tools that we even have available to us. Secondly, I question if you just take the votes, and it's blocks who literally had millions of votes and immediately would bounce to 22, your problem's not really solved very well, in my opinion, versus literally if the BPs could be like, yo, I'm just going to help my homie unregister, and he's not going to wake up to an absolute dumpster fire in the morning. It's literally those two types of scenarios, but that's just my 2 cents.
There's another way to mitigate this, is within the new list just doesn't remove one block producer, but we manually add the first standby to the list, and it votes again for 21 block producers. In that way, it completely removes that issue. I don't know how easy it is to do that. We have the list in the contract, so we just need to build. It doesn't solve the problem, but it's a workaround that makes almost impossible this to happen. But yeah, the problem is there. We agree on that.
Nick?
Sí, mis amigos.
So I was just looking at the unreg prod call. Why couldn't you call that? It only checks the caller. It doesn't require auth of the producer that you passed. So you could add a custom permission to that account that could trigger that, no? I don't see the problem.
Well, you can have a change in the system contracts. That's what we're saying.
Sorry, what did you say?
It requires a change in the system contracts or change the permissions. It's not that it cannot be done. It requires something that has not been done.
No, okay, but yeah, you can just set up a permission, right? You don't have to change the contract.
You can have a custom unreg permission. I have keys that's what my minions had to be able to just do an unreg and an oh shit button. But you can't call the unreg command for it. The BPs can do it by wrapping an EOSIO unreg command. I believe it's how we can unreg. You can do a wrap. That's that EOSIO wrap function that allows
the Wax team could add the action to the EOSIO prod account.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, you can definitely do a bunch of different things to be able to allow that ability for the BPs to have some of that control. So, but you can't just call an unreg command for somebody else. It'd be nice if you could, probably use security hole. But you can do a custom permission. Matter of fact, we have one, and you can stack multiple keys on it and do all the magic sweet sauce of full EOSIO antelope permission.
Yeah, I just wondered. It was talked about like it was impossible, and I was like, "Am I missing something?"
It's because we don't. The BPs don't have the EOSIO power on Wax.
Yeah, what is impossible?
You just add a custom permission. You don't need the system contractor to modify it. You can just add a custom permission with all the keys.
Yes.
Wax, or just add the.
Don't need to have all the keys though.
Right, but you either Wax can give the BP some control. That was point number one. Is that it doesn't have to be God mode. It should be active EOSIO, to be honest with you. But if we don't, fine. But we can't wrap any action. But once we can wrap any action, that's kind of Pandora's box. So that's where we're at. So it's a much bigger conversation, but that's fundamentally the technical way to resolve that. The 15 of 21 can wrap an unreg command or anything else.
Yeah, or just require everyone to set the custom permission. That seems so much easier, but
you don't even need custom permission. You can just reference them by name. You can use active. You can use @gov. You can use I think we'd use unreg prod or unreg. That doesn't.
No, but he means that each BP can set it on his account to give EOSIO prods the permission to unrig for them. I
Fair
think
enough.
that's what he
You
meant.
give any group, yeah.
But I don't think that's a good. It's enough that one team doesn't do that, and then you can't do it for them. I don't know. Just do it in a real way instead.
You can make
do
it
a lot of hacks.
stored, right? I mean, there are ways to solve this. I mean,
Correct, but none of the ways get agreed upon, and so yeah, you just get left with meh. Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that that it's clear that like a permission is also an option. Like it was talked about, like if it's impossible, or you need to change the system contract, and I think that's
But to be honest, each team should have notifications. They should have things set up for this. I mean, it can still happen. It can happen for us. It can happen for anyone. I don't know. I'm not sure that all the responsibilities should be removed, but I think this is one of the things that should be, like, EOSIO prod should have more power. I don't think one excludes the other.
Yeah, that's why I brought this up. It's like you need to have contingencies. Sure, everybody is responsible for themselves, but it's good to have thought about this and have some lines of action available, right?
So, which option do we roll with?
I mean, the changing the vote is something that was done, and that is something that you could do, but there's no agreement about when you should do that. Like, we should probably figure out what is a threshold that you want to intervene after giving BPs some time to do it themselves. Like I said, I would also just contact every BP and make sure that you have an up-to-date way and the right contacts for everybody in case of emergency. Just ask them to confirm, like, okay, if stuff's on fire, what do I do to make sure that the person that needs to see this gets to see this? I don't think it's that much of an effort, and I would make sure that you revisit that like every 6 months or something, just to make sure that all the contact info is up to date. It's all like you don't want to use it, but you want to have that info in case you need it, right? And then explore some of the other things. But I'm not a BP, I'm just an outsider, so maybe the BPs themselves have a more weighted opinion there.
In my opinion.
So we also need to define something for the guidelines, which would then be that time range that you just described in your last comment. Currently, we have the minimum requirement at 98%, sitting at 98% of all rounds scheduled. I don't even know exactly how much time that is, to be honest. Didn't do the math on that, but I don't think it's very long. And now we are planning to bring that even down to 99%, which is still a considerable amount of rounds scheduled. I think at least that was what we last discussed. I can't be definite about it, but yeah. I think that would be then the threshold, right? The moment
So 30 rounds missed was 1 hour and 3 minutes every time between notifications. So just have to do the math back to the percentage probably.
Yeah. And then once we reach that threshold, we should take action and renew the voting.
So that was over a 6-week period, or how much?
2 weeks. 2 weeks and 98% of rounds scheduled.
Okay.
Which I see currently on Haloa, it says 2 weeks and 9,600 600 rounds scheduled in 2 weeks.
Okay. So you want to set a threshold at, say, 96 blocks missed, then it's over the 1%.
Yep.
So basically, once it dings 100, you can go boom.
And how do we go about that threshold is reached, but the node is recovered? We still exclude that node from the current tech evaluation period, or not, Joseph? What do you think about that?
Didn't you fill the minimum requirements at that point?
Yeah, but it's only like
Testing, please.
The score is only updated when the next tech review is happening. So that's where the score is on par with what we actually vote. So the question is, now that, let's say, Wombat has recovered its nodes and we are doing tech evaluations next week on Monday, are they excluded for that period, like until next Monday? Are they excluded, or are they free to be voted in again when the nodes are operational?
I need to read the criteria again.
I think we don't have a ruling on that yet.
I think we discussed that a few times, but that's because we discussed a few times. I'm not sure if we actually end up ruling something about that. Because that's what happens. We discuss a lot of stuff, but not everything goes into the criteria. So sometimes I'm not sure about it.
Exactly, and that would also require us to now revote and restore their past votes, right? So that they would be able to produce. But I think we should have a rule in place that prevents us from voting irregularly, like only with the exception of voting someone out if such an incident happens. I think that should also be in there. Like for them to be able to produce again on mainnet until next Monday, we would need to re-vote with the old score.
Yeah, but not going to do it.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
Yeah. All right. So a few options out there. Kefa is unfortunately not with us today. I'm sure he would have something to add to that debate, as he wanted to raise that one today.
I'm sure you'll talk about it plenty after the call with him.
Yeah, surely. Okay, we got another 20 minutes left. Let's conclude that topic and get into our whole debate about full history, partial history nodes, and what we are going to do going forward. I'm sure you're all waiting for me to bring up a point, but feel free to just go ahead and share some feedback or your insights on that. I saw there were some questions today on the Guild's public channel. Yep.
Keep in mind that with the amount of rounds missed, the block producer will be reviewed in the next technical evaluation.
Yep.
But as soon as we check the performance in the previous 2 weeks, it will be below 99%. That means failing minimum requirements.
Correct. So they are out for 3 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're going to use testnet data. So if they are good on testnet, they do not miss rounds on testnet, they are back to being evaluated again with no penalties in a little bit more of 2 weeks from now.
So the earliest they are back in schedule is November 4th.
Yeah. That will be about right.
And unfortunately, failing the minimum requirements means a score of sub 125.
Yes. No standby payment, nothing.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly how it's done by the current rules. I like that. All right. Back to the history topic. Let me just throw in a few questions, or maybe I'm throwing in a question and you guys can comment on it. Partial Hyperion nodes should only have 4 weeks of data instead of 6. Any strong opinion on this? Any concerns?
Why?
Saving money.
And what if they have? So you just want to limit the minimum requirement?
That's completely new. I'm sure Joseph heard it the first time today, or I mentioned it. I just came up with it like spontaneously, honestly. Just the question: why do we have 6 weeks of partial history and not 4 weeks?
We also discussed this, Johnny, in the last call.
I forgot about it then.
Yeah, you forgot it, but we discussed. So the question is, why not? Is there any important difference between 6 to 4 weeks in regards of data being accessed? Something that justifies being 6 weeks? Our logic is, if there is no big difference, 4 weeks, it has less technical requirements.
It's probably 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes.
And easier to synchronize than 6 weeks.
How many blocks are 4 weeks?
180,000.
You're asking the difficult questions again.
Haven't done the math yet.
No, it's easy. It's 86,400 times 2 is a day. Then
You already said 6,900. 9,600 was 2 weeks, so double that, and you have 4 weeks. You just said it like minutes ago.
And how many are the default indices sizes, Michael? Is it 10 million or 10,000? The default in Elastic. 10 million, right?
Cut in 10 million, but I mean they cut at the 10 million block. So it, I mean you could, that doesn't always work. As for the date range, right?
Yeah, but I mean, if they are gonna keep 4 months or 4 weeks instead of 6, how would they easily do that? Does it even make sense to change this? Because they still need to manage how they manage it in Elastics.
In my mind, I mean, if you're going through the effort of trimming it, you're probably 4 or 6 weeks. I mean, it's about the same effort. It's just the date range because it has to kind of intelligently do it, whatever. But in regards to what it kind of means technically, in my opinion, I mean, that's about what we run. And it's probably the difference between, I don't know, a 1 terabyte, a 2 terabyte, or maybe 4 terabytes, but that's probably way more than 6 weeks. So, I mean, that's really about the only difference, and the time to resync it if it breaks. But I mean,
the time to resync, it should be shorter, right?
To rebuild it from scratch, it's not, I mean, so yes, to build it from scratch or I mean, from that side, but I don't know whether there's that much of a requirement difference from our public API side. If we were to only keep 4 weeks, I've always felt this way. I didn't really care, but 4 weeks is about 6 weeks to us.
Okay. No, in short, there is no significant improvement on moving from 6 to 4.
Space, it'd be less space used, so your requirements would get less, and the build time or rebuild time.
I don't know how most tools use the data.
I would say I don't, from our side as a public provider and what we normally see, it's not. Those other 2 weeks, I don't think make a difference, or the 2 weeks after that, right? I mean, it's really more of a if it's really the last couple of days, or
Okay.
not. in our opinion as a provider, but we're not everybody.
Because 4 weeks is not entirely a month, right?
Yeah, 30 days. Then not 4 weeks, like exactly 30 days.
Well, the way I look at it, because I mean, as a provider, I more look at it as space, right? Is it's about 15 gigs a day is what my graphs show over the last, 2 weeks average. About 15 gigs a day is what gets thrown of all the transactions into the Elasticsearch data, right? So in my mind, you can extrapolate the number of days, give or take.
Yeah, I don't think we should change that unless there is a significant improvement in something, right? That makes so the thing here is to make the life of the block producers easier. If it doesn't change much, I'm not sure that it's worth to change that.
Why stop at 30 days? Just make it 24 hours. 99.9% of Hyperion requests are just a transaction data. So
I would probably say, well, at least a week. If you want to call it history, you got to have some. I would say, just because when things break, you got to be able to go back, and that's what people get burned on. Is if you miss those first couple of days, the world progresses very fast past you, and it was hard to catch back up once you get a couple of days behind. So, but yes, in my opinion, our opinion, 6 weeks or a week probably isn't that much of a difference if you're known to be a partial Hyperion, but probably more than an hour 24. But a week might even suffice if you really wanted to go aggressive at it. And what does that mean? Way less, hardware requirement, space requirement. And yeah, when one crashes, shit, I could spin one up and meet requirements and get back online within a couple hours. So it would be easier overall for the providers in those cases. There's going to be some UX lost, but probably not a lot, in my opinion. Everybody uses gray mass for history anyway, so.
Cars actually has a good point with Hyperion partial indexing only the last 24 hours. That's how I would go about it, honestly. Not 24, but 7 days at max.
Right. Current
7 days at max. Moving everything to full Hyperion
probably makes more sense, because I guess most of the data is just the last few days.
That's what most for people are looking for. I know Gray Mass years ago did the kind of study on it. Obviously, things have changed, but
unless you are approaching tax season, and then for some reason you don't have enough, that's when you need some full.
Well, and that's what I say is, I mean, there's not that much of a difference between, hey, do you have kind of what just happened? Or do you have Since Eternity, which gives you that ability and all of the transactions?
Yeah.
There you go. So, yes. If your goal was to try to make it easier for the providers to provide those light partials, a week, 2 weeks, whatever, you're probably talking, a day to build. If you've done it before, it could take you 2 weeks if it's your first time.
I mean, there's some useful stuff inside that software that we don't have in any other part of our API landscape, namely WebSocket connections to listen into transactions, wallets, contracts, right? can't be found on any other endpoint. The only alternative we have there is what the Pinex team demoed 2-3 weeks ago, substreams and subgraphs and all that part that they show us. If you're really trying to build a responsive dApp, you would most likely want to build supporting WebSockets for your client and not querying a REST API repeatedly.
Yeah, we've got, I don't know, 6 or 7 steady clients that use our Wax stream. I don't know who they are. I think I know one. But there are some people that use it.
Okay, so are there any other objections with Hyperion? Partial Hyperion should only index the last 7 days. Any concerns, any objections to this?
Nick had a good one. I mean, the block explorers are the primary, or wallets even, are the primary use cases of public history servers.
Okay, so we will always have access to full history in one way or the other.
Right.
Either we move that to generate your API key and have your quota and have a partnership with us because you're providing a block explorer or any other essential tool on chain. So here you go, free access to it. If it's like strategically important for the chain, we can manage that. Pretty sure. That will never go away. Like there will always be access to full historic data. That's pretty important. We don't have any further plans to take that away.
Right. And sadly, kind of the state we're in anyway is everybody kind of uses gray mass anyway. So when poor Aaron has any problems, everybody thinks the world ends because the few sites or wallets that use it kind of get jammed. And even though the chain is fully running, but it is, yeah, valid. But yes, hopefully you have a reliable, remember that in itself was a whole battle. Once you have a block explorer that has access to the chain, those nodes can get hammered.
Yeah. Okay, let me throw another problematic thesis into the room. Big consumers big consumers of our precious disk space, not to name them, but like if you fill up 50% of the blockchain with your transactions, you should be responsible by your own to give your users access to this data.
And what if you don't?
Yeah, that's a good.
Then the user is punished, right?
Unfortunately, the user may be punished here if he doesn't have any free access to this data. Yeah. However, we currently have like the full Hyperions in the network, which will be there even in the future. So you will need to query that data set on there. Or alternatively, we move into a direction which makes it easy for those dApps to have access to their data. Like I can see it playing out pretty well if we defaulted to the substreams and the graph for Alien Worlds and Farmers World data, for example. And that could even be like the indexing thing over there and providing that data, which is going to be also done by the Pinex team. That we could treat as a service in itself, right? Like they provide that to the users. So they fulfill some sort of our tech criteria. We could read it as that.
We've done a good job of commoditizing the data of the blockchain, just because there's a sheer massive amount of it. But it's very difficult to monetize that as a service. As somebody who's tried to do that, just so you know.
Okay. Yeah, but what if we went ahead and did it like that? Like, we don't oblige guilds to index Alien Worlds and Farmers Worlds transactions going forward, except on the full Hyperions, which should be, as expected, full of every transaction on Wax. What if we just did that and say required that one guild that provides Alien Worlds data to be responsible for providing actually that data to their customers or that product?
Well, I mean, or the consumer to find a provider, to find somebody to get it off of the chain. It's still on chain. It's just to be able to consume it, not in a consumable manner. So I tend to less lean towards requiring everything to always be there. But if you're going to say everything's there, everything needs to be there. Otherwise, you need to be able to say, as a network decision made, providers, we don't offer that information at a layer 2 decoded solution. You're more than welcome to get it from the chain. There's nothing preventing you from doing it. You don't have to pay for it. The data, but you got to pay to do the heavy lifting and get the data out if you want it. Or the DApp themselves, you know, if they wanted it to be whatever. It's a slippery slope, but if the network wants to do that and has a way to manage it, I get what it's trying to do.
But currently, if you look at what Alien World is actually doing, they use their own APIs for the get table row stuff, and then after you do a mine, it does a get transaction on the, in this case, the weekend Hyperion, and that will also just be a short-lived thing. So I don't think it would matter for them if you would store the Alien World's history, not for the app. The app doesn't use it itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I separate the data on the chain and historically separate from an app that uses it to kind of validate transactions when it could be done differently. But I just more look at like how we use it. I mean, we read the data, we pull it, we use it, we whatever, we interact with the blockchain data.
No, but what Giannis was saying, like, you want to make the dApps pay for it. And in this case, Alien World doesn't even use that data themselves, right? They don't actively query it. Right. They don't use it in the normal operation of the game, right?
Right, but they pay to put it on chain, and so it's there to be used. I mean, that's
yeah, and
they don't care. They don't care if none of your Hyperions really do it. I mean, as long as it sounds like Weekends does, or we use ours because we include it as well. But I more look at it differently: is do you have your history servers bear the burden of carrying all this extra weight? When you're right, 99% of people probably really don't even need it. No, I'm fine if that's a decision that's made. And yeah, if Alien Worlds themselves needs it or the community wants to provide for it, they find a provider because it's on the chain. They're paying to put it on chain. Here it is. You know, that's kind of how they feel.
Yeah, but maybe my perspective on that is wrong, but then the community collectively pays all the VPs to index that data for them and have them accessible on a Hyperion, which after hearing the tokenomics of substreams and that, and the stake you need to bring with you, since hearing that, it just doesn't make sense to me to have to be so cost inefficient with that alone, just the alien worlds data.
Michael, you are right in that, you know,
I'm always
right. You're right in that, well, they're paying to use the blockchain like everyone else, right? But
they're on chain.
But that is also, you know, that's a bit of an understatement as to the sheer magnitude, right?
It depends on how you look at it overall, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
different folks.
In the end, it's like none of us should be in this position to even like, you know, trying to like decide like, well, what, you know, it's like, it almost feels like it's an oversight in the design of Antelope.
Oh, there's some flaws in the whole resource utilization. Absolutely. Okay, so we like to pick on alien worlds. Obviously, they're the majority of it. But if it's not alien worlds, farmers world. Well, what's up on Mars? Got a guy that runs millions of bots. I mean, there's levels of air quote useless data getting smashed onto the chain because the resource model kind of allows for it. But you're right, there's some flaws. But this is the deck of cards that we are dealt so far.
Absolutely.
So where do you draw the line? What's the threshold? If you become 80% of the chain, you get axed.
Yeah. And again, it's like I don't want to be in a position, and I don't think anyone should be in a position where they gotta face that dilemma, right? Because it's an impossible scenario.
So I say I don't really have a strong stance because I get both sides of it, but it's an absolute fact. You know, you kind of got to deal with it's, and I agree. There should be a burden more pushed back towards the chain can make a economic decision to say our providers are going to do this. If you need it, it's there. It's not being prevented, but you need to do the extra legwork to be able to get that massive amount of data because it's just not economically viable for our chain to do it publicly. We do provide his public providers. You know, I don't think it should be completely off limits, but you know, the chain data is there. Just because a Hyperion server doesn't have it doesn't mean it's not.
For me, as long as it's very clear that it's a filtered thing and it's not grouped up with other partials, then it's whatever. I don't think that the requirements has to be high for anyone. I think that those that actually provide other value that is used, that should be rewarded. It should not be the other way around.
I probably didn't quite get you.
Speak Ikean, please.
Yeah. How can I put it in another way? So the APIs are here for users and for developers. They need to be able to understand what's the difference of the APIs, and the more you change the rules, the harder that will be. It needs to be very clear if it's a filtered API or not, and a partial or not, and what everything means, and how you actually understand that information. I don't think that requirements, I don't mean, the goal is to save cost for teams by reducing the requirements, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But what about the teams that don't have that same problem or situation? I don't know. But this goes again to the whole OIG scoring system. I'm not sure that I've never been a super fan of it. So you're trying to score every team the same way when every team has different skills and expertise and setups.
I do think that's changing though.
Yeah, in some way it is. From the start to now, it's a big change.
So
But it's still
really
not good. It's just better. Less bad.
Scoping what, in my opinion, it's scoping what the Wax network, not Wax team, us, all of us, decide. We want to offer as our public infrastructure that all of the guilds have a little bit of history, have APIs that can, have the right endpoints, have peer-to-peers, whatever it is, providing it, scoping it, and whatever. If I, as a provider, also want to include some extra shit that y'all want to filter out, cool. I'm just lazy. I don't want to filter, right? So, but clearly defining it, and like I say, I think we've done a much better, in my opinion. Yeah, like a week maybe. I would say if you're that small, filtering the transaction starts to get a little irrelevant. You know, I mean, it's got 100 gigs of data and it just cycles out. But I consistently presenting, here's a partial, and it can be as trimmed as we think it should be. And then here's all the data limited or paid. And then, of course, the data itself is free for all on the chain forever. Right? Anders, that's what you were saying. Just don't mix and match them. I mean,
it has to be very clear for user perspective.
You should never expect anything beyond this, and this. You should never expect it to be longer than 7 days. You should never expect it to include alien world transactions. You should never expect it to, whatever, support more than 10,000 requests, because that's one of the default limits of people. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah, and the Hyperion Hub, for example, is making that easier.
Right.
Well, the goal is
define that expectation, which now it's 6 weeks, and it may or may not include alien world transaction. Next iteration will be maybe it's 7 days, and it does include every transaction because it's not monstrous amounts of data now. And those that deal with monstrous data, full Hyperions is really full Hyperions. All of the transactions, if you choose to change this mission, would be available at a limited aspect by those providers for the block explorers, apps that decide they want to pay for it. And then obviously the burden is on the app or the community or the users of the data themselves. If you want more, you should talk to somebody. I know a guy.
Or ultimately pay for it. Like, we are pretty unique with having free access to full history.
Not really.
No. Infura's made it hard. No, not really.
I mean, they have a free tier too. Like, you can sign up and have some API calls to the full history of Ethereum or whatever you're building on. Sure. But eventually this isn't enough for a depth or for a block explorer.
I agree. Number one, it's easy, it's known, it's the standard now. Number two, when you do commit to, damn, and Infura, I either got to pay them or run my own. You run your own, you download it, you launch a script, you let it sync, AWS, it's fine. So it's a little different ball game, but I do agree that we're in a different sport. We have millions and millions and millions and millions of transactions with lots of data in them, so it's a different game. But I disagree with you. People expect public infrastructure to be generally available. And even if it's paywall, to be like, all right, please have a path. My opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Sounded like Anders too.
Yeah, needs to be clear.
Is that IKEA enough for you? Did you understand?
Yeah. So the most favorable thing to do is still keeping the full Hyperions, or keeping some of them, essentially those that are the most effective, being hosted on bare metal, right? Being maintained by guilds with a strong knowledge about that software for years. Having 3 4, 5, 6 of them in the network, even more.
Yeah, I mean, providers as a service. It can be done, just a work, pile of work.
Yeah. Okay. That was some good feedback today. Something will change about the current situation, that's for sure. Now that we introduced the version 6 guidelines, we didn't want to overwhelm you with changes on the technical side. So we're holding that back a little bit for another 2 to 4 weeks, but expect an update on the tech criteria to happen in the next weeks. That's what I can tell. And then, of course, don't forget to submit your report. The cutoff is today, end of day UTC, your final report. And after that, we are starting the 2 weeks cycle where we do evaluate whatever contribution we receive. So that's the starting point of the version 6 guidelines. And we are preparing our Calendly to have regular calls with the guilds, Monday through Wednesday. We even had one today, where you can demo to us what you're currently building, and we're bringing back the points for projects in development. So if you're building something interesting, reach out to us and we can share your Calendly with you. And you can book a call. You can schedule a call for your next contribution submission. Other than that, did I forget about anything urgent? Probably not. Okay. Any other comment or any closing word? Anything you want to share? All right, then let's conclude today's Wax Tech Chat. Appreciate everyone showing up. Thanks for all the insights and sharing the knowledge, and looking forward to the next one, next week, Tuesday. Hope you have a great week, and don't forget your reports.